What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Rustin. Directed by George C. Wolfe and written by people like Julian Breeze and Dustin Lant Black. This film stars people like Colman, Domingo as Bayard Rustin, as well as Chris Rock, Glynn Turman, Amal Amin, Michael Potts, Jeffrey Wright, and so many more. And I'd like to start this off by saying a big thanks to those kind folks over at Netflix for sending me an invite to go and check this movie out in theaters. I just got home from the press screening for this movie, and I'm happy to say I enjoyed this one. I found it to be an incredibly well-made film that tells us a story that we're familiar with, but from a different perspective, adding to the narrative overall, and honestly being an impactful and emotional film in a lot of ways. I didn't love every element of it, but I genuinely found it to be a really strong film. This film is going to be hitting Netflix, their streaming service, on November 17th, and I actually got the chance to check it out quite a bit early, but just a little bit before it has a limited theatrical run that's starting within the next couple of weeks. So definitely look for this movie if you are interested in it to see if it's playing in your local area. But if you're waiting for it to hit Netflix, it'll be out on November 17th. So let's talk about what this movie's all about. As I mentioned before, this film stars Colman Domingo as Bayard Rustin, who is an individual who worked very closely with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. during the Civil Rights Movement, and was most notably in charge of and essentially incepted the idea of the big march that of course would have the famed "I Have a Dream" speech attached to it, where they were able to get over 200,000 people to appear in Washington for this march that of course was incredibly integral to the Civil Rights Movement. Of course has a lot to do with helping end that wave of racism. Of course racism still lives today, but of course dealing with injustices when it comes to racial inequality and different things like that. It was an absolutely historical big moment in time, and it's crazy to think that it happened so long ago, but also not that long ago. And this film specifically hones in on Bayard Rustin, as the film's title would suggest, as we get to see all of the workings that he did behind the scenes to make that big march a reality. And along the way, he would have various challenges and have various people on his team that he would work with to try to make this a reality, no matter what roadblocks got in front of him. And in a lot of ways, this is an inspiring tale about somebody who's fighting for racial inequality and is trying to do everything in their power to create a world where people can truly live free for who and what they are. And on the other side, it's a movie that also shows the racial inequality that was happening at that time. So it can be both inspiring and heartbreaking in a lot of ways. And what makes Bayard Rustin an interesting individual in all this is not only is he a black man in a very racist time, during a very racially charged and political crazy time, but he's also a gay man, so they have to deal with that as well at this time while trying to spearhead this movement in a lot of ways alongside Martin Luther King Jr. And of course Martin Luther King Jr. is an individual who we've had tons of biographies or documentaries done on. Even just in the last few years there have been some big movies that have come out that center on Dr. Martin Luther King. And in the case of this movie, he's a big supporting character, but it mainly focuses on the character of Rustin, as this movie is told from his perspective, showing us the struggles that he faced to get the idea of this march off the ground, and how there were plenty of people, even people of color, who 110% did not believe that this was even something that was going to be able to be a possibility. So to tell us a story that we're familiar with, that we've seen tons of documentaries and tons of biopics of, from a different perspective, I think in and of itself is an impressive feat, because again, this is something that has been, done over and over and over again. But in this case, focusing on Rustin, I thought it was a really interesting approach to the story, and it made for an emotional, good time at the movies. Now, I mentioned before I didn't love everything about this film, and I'll genuinely say that I did find the film to be rather slow at times, and there is a romantic element that's in the film, along with some infidelity, that I felt was integral to lean into the homosexual parts of Rustin's life, but ultimately I felt kind of derailed the movie's overall point at a lot of points. It felt like it was something they had to throw in there because of the fact that it was part of his life, life, but ultimately didn't feel like it serviced the entire story as a whole, that's most notably about this iconic march that he would be integral in creating. And so, you know, there's elements about this film that I felt could have been trimmed out. There are elements about this film that I'm torn on because it feels like it just needed to kind of be thrown in there, but it didn't really serve much for the overall story. There are little small subplots that I didn't necessarily find myself all that interested in, that I felt kind of ruined the film's pacing and oftentimes had me feeling a little bit of lack of interest. But when the film hones in on what this film is about, which is an inspiring, selfless individual who loves people and wants to see there actually be freedom and equality for all kinds of individuals, no matter who they are, where they were born, or what their skin color is, that's where this film shines. That's where this film is impactful. That's where this film is going to be remembered. And I think if you remove a lot of the romantic infidelity elements of this film, you have a far stronger film, in my opinion. But the big standout in here are the performances. As I mentioned, there's a lot of big names here like Jeffrey Wright or Chris Rock and so many others. But the one that really blew me away, and I think is going to blow most people away in this film, is Colman Domingo, who I think gives an incredible performance as Bayard Rustin. I mean, I was completely invested in his character from beginning to end, and even for the sequences that I felt didn't necessarily need to be there, or felt tacked on, or felt slow, his performance in those moments was without a doubt what was getting me through them, and consistently shined throughout the course of the film, as he was a consistently endearing and exciting character to root for. So you felt for him when he was getting wins, but you also felt for him when he was losing, and you also felt for him when he was having to deal with not only being a black man in a racially charged time, but also being a homosexual in a time that also was not as accepting of that. Now, like a lot of times with these movies, and since I just came home from seeing the movie, I'm not super familiar with all of the details of Bayard Rustin's true story and his life, so I can't speak to anything that was in this movie that actually didn't happen in real life, or anything that they did that was a creative liberty. I have absolutely no idea when it comes down to the comparisons of real life and the film, but what I can say is that this is a film that's well shot, well acted, and has a solid central theme of equality, and has an inspirational tale as well as something that is a cautionary tale for some stuff we still deal with in this world when it comes to racism. Overall, I found it to be a solid watch. Not my favorite biopic I've seen ever or anything like that, or even this year, but definitely a standout movie that touches on some really real things that is definitely worth checking out when it hits Netflix on November 17th. So big thanks to you guys for watching. Definitely hit that like button if you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys thought about this movie. If you checked it out, did you like this movie? Did you not like this movie? Definitely want to continue the conversation about this movie down below in the description box, and I invite any and all opinions. Bye-bye.